Welcome to Heavy Rhythm Guitar Mastery. I'm Troy Stetna. If you want to master rhythm guitar in terms of technique, being a solid player, but also in terms of developing your musicianship, you're in the right place. Whether you are a beginner, maybe just playing a year or two, or if you're an intermediate player, maybe you've been playing for decades, but you get stuck or you've reached a plateau and you don't seem to be progressing. That happens because you've missed certain important fundamentals. And what we do here is we're going to dial it back and build the structure with those fundamentals so that you can continue to progress. This course is also very helpful and useful for even advanced players who feel like they may have missed some elements of really perfecting their rhythm and timing. Rhythm and timing is a really tricky aspect of music. We're going to incorporate that here so that you don't miss that. But like I said, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced player who might have missed some of the skills necessary, we're going to iron it all out and make sure that you have everything you need for solid musicianship. Our process here is to build one small step at a time, weaving together all of the different elements at first an easy level and then progressing gradually. And what are those elements? Well, obviously there's the chording element, or what's happening in the fretting hand. So we've got at the beginning our movable power chords is where we start, which are pretty simple, but we start with that. Chording aspect, that's a thread that runs through the method and it increases step by step. Another element, of course, is the rhythm and timing aspect, and we start with simple rhythms. We talk about how to understand pulse and how to execute pulse, because pulse is in the body. A lot of people miss that. We're not going to miss that. We start with simple rhythms, and that thread develops throughout the whole method, increasing gradually. The third element is what I call a knowledge piece. You need to understand what you're doing. And that progresses into music theory, a little piece at a time, building on that thread as we move forward. And then, of course, finally, application. If we don't apply everything you learn, it's useless. And you don't really know it. You don't really own it. So the process we're going to do here is we're going to take those four elements and we wrap them together at a certain level. So step one is obviously a beginner level. We wrap those elements together and we apply them, and then we're going to look at some songs that use those elements that aren't too much of a stretch for you, might stretch you a little, but around that level. Then we move into step two. We're going to build each aspect of that thread to the next step and the next and the next, and we just keep building over and over and just keep growing your musicianship one step at a time. I will also mention that part one introduces a lot of what I'd call seeds of music theory and even some seeds of the first steps of ear training, because really music theory and ear training, they really go together. And we're going to pull them together right from the very beginning. At first it's very subtle. You might not even realize that you're learning some music theory or that you're developing your ear. But in fact we're laying the groundwork here in part one as you move forward. And then in part two, then we're really going to hit that hard. And as you start to see how all that works and you start to integrate all those seeds together, you start to understand a fabric of how music works. This will happen gradually, it's not going to be overnight. We don't want to jump in and look at music theory like a subject either. That's a very poor approach, because that's not how you learn. What we really want to do is one piece at a time. As you learn, let's say, a particular song, we're going to look at some element of ear training and music theory that are dominant in that song. You get familiar with that. Then oh, lo and behold, you see another song, and what do you know? There's a similarity there, and you notice the similarity, and it sounds similar. You know, as you do it like that, that's how you own the knowledge. You're not learning just songs. You know, you're learning way, way more than a collection of songs. And that brings me to the next point. You know, we learn music because we're inspired by music. And that means songs. You know, you have your favorite band, you got some favorite songs. It's like, ooh, that's cool. I want to learn how to do that. I want to recreate that, you know, on the guitar. And so we start thinking that our goal is to play these songs. And that's true, playing the songs and playing them well, that is a goal, okay? But that's one layer. It's kind of the superficial goal. Underneath that is a deeper goal. You see, the songs are really, you can think of them as a vehicle that embodies a whole lot of fundamental skills. And the song is a specific embodiment of those skills, a specific presentation. But when you learn the song, in order to play it well, you have to learn the skills that are embodied in that song. And then you learn another song. Those skills are embodied in a slightly different way. And then another and another and another. Well, when you learn enough, you start to really realize that what you've done is you have learned all the fundamental skills, all the fundamental elements of musicianship and control. Because what you're really doing is you're training your hands. You're training your left hand and your right hand to do those skills that are essential to be able to play whatever you want to play. When you have control here and you have control here, when you put rhythm and you feel it in your body, you have good timing, you can play anything. And then as you develop your ear and your knowledge of what you're hearing, you start to finally realize that music, in a sense, is actually very simple. It looks complicated through the fretboard. That's the most complicated way to approach it. And that's how we as a beginner start. You have to look at the fretboard because that's where we start. But eventually we start to turn the corner. You start to hear musical structures, identify them by ear, know what they are, know what they're called, and see them on the fretboard. And when that starts to happen, you come to realize, you know, music as it expresses in all these different songs, it's kind of the same thing over and over and over. It has this interesting aspect, though, that when we hear music, we get sort of carried away in the details, in the presentation, in the instrumentation, in the feel of this song as different from that song, conveys a different, you know, attitude and all that great stuff, and that's true. But at the core, there is a simplicity to it, and when we start to get to the simplicity, that's when our musicianship really rises to the highest levels and we can play anything we want. And that's really what we want. So I want you to be aware that the songs, yeah, they're a goal. They're a short-term goal. But what's the real goal, in my view, is developing the musicianship and the control and the capacity to play all the fundamentals so that you can play anything that you hear. This is going to really set you on the right path to be the best musician that you can be. And because of that, I want you to be aware as you go through the course that the songs are presented where they are presented for some very specific reasons. You know, they're kind of placed in a gradual ascending methodology or developmental stages. Now, that's not to say that the song in, you know, part 2 or step 2 is always going to be more difficult than step 1. Generally, that's true. But everyone's a little bit different, comes into the course with, you know, a different set of experiences. You know, maybe you've been playing a while and certain techniques you're familiar with. Well, those are going to be easier for you, obviously, than something that's not. And so everyone's going to be at a slightly different level. So you're probably going to find that some songs are going to be a little harder for you than other songs. If a song is difficult, it means that the fundamentals that it entails are fundamentals that you haven't got. And therefore, they shouldn't be skipped. The things that are difficult are things that you do want to pay attention to and you do want to try it. Which leads me to another aspect about dealing with songs. I know everybody's got their favorite songs. You're going to come into this and you're going to be like, oh, I want to learn that song and that song. But this one over here, I don't care about that. I don't really even like that music. Whether it's a song or a style or even a whole sub-style or whatever. And what I want to encourage you to do, though, at least for the purposes of this course, is learn every song, even if it's not your favorite. No, that doesn't mean that I want you to perfect it and come back to it and play it and play it and play it and play it, But at least try to, listen to it, look at the transcription, learn the notes, at least to the point where you can play the thing, play along with it. Once you do that, you have ingrained at least the basis of the fundamentals that are there. You've done your job. Now, maybe you don't like it that much, so you don't keep, reviewing it and playing it for fun. Just do it a couple times and move on. But I want to encourage you to do that, because that's going to give you the most you can get out of this course. If you come into this course and you say, well, I like this style and this style, but not these 4 styles, and you're going to be very spotty about it, you're going to learn, 2 or 3 songs out of the 10, you're still going to get some benefit, but you won't be as well-rounded of a player, and you won't really get the whole picture. You'll miss certain elements, and some of those elements that I'll mention in this song or this song are elements that we build on. They're elements that might fuse together an understanding of what's happening at a fundamental level. And that's why I want you to go through every song, at least watch the video and play through the thing and try it out. It's not going to hurt you to play a song that you're not crazy about. And like I said, you don't have to perfect it. If it's not your cup of tea, you can just give it a shot, learn what's there, understand it, move on. And the ones that you really like, well, you can spend longer on those. That's great, because obviously inspiration is important. And you want to play music that uplifts you, that really is your hot button, because that is effortless. When you find the music that inspires you, dig into it. And the more you do that, the more you effortlessly spend time playing. And when you do that, your mind goes into the musical aspect of what you're doing, starts to forget about the technique or what note follows what note. You just start listening to what you're playing. That is a really important element of developing your musicianship. You don't want to be always, trying to play the notes like they're outside of you. You want to bring them in and become one with them. That's really where it's all headed. And when you do that, what you're really doing is you are ingraining the skills, these fundamentals, into muscle memory so that they become automatic. So that's what we want to do. And it's faster to do it when you get lost in the music because you love the music. So I do want to encourage you, of course, play the stuff that you like and play it more. I hope that provides a little context for you, a little framework for how you might move forward and apply yourself and use the materials in this course. And let's get started.